would probably need, I would say, I don't know that they would shut it down completely. I think they'd probably do it like a weekend at a time or something like that if they needed to do it, probably over the span of a month maybe, so maybe like 4 weekends. But I'm kind of guessing there a little bit.
And the repairs that we made to that entrance slab were, you said about 8 years ago, probably? 2016?
Yeah, about 2016, I think. I tried to review that to see when they completed it.
Before Jeremy's time?
Yep, before Jeremy.
Does anybody remember, Dennis, how long how much disruption that caused?
Not a lot, because they did a lot of it, like, right there, it's like on weekends.
Kyle?
So you talked a little bit about mobilization and getting them on site and the efficiencies behind that. So obviously just better understanding them, repairs, because in some regards are these two different locations. Does that create some additional efficiencies where if they're working nights or weekends that the crew supports that ability of being able to get both those things done where you're not having to wait for one or the other? So
Yep.
instead of like a half a day's work, it's a whole day's work, but they're actually in two different sectors.
Yeah.
A little bit about what may be the value of combining that work.
Yeah, and they definitely do that in the past. They can't shut down the entrance because the cars need to get in and out. So that typically always ends up being night work, weekend work, things like that. And so they have to kind of work on it, get it back open again. But other areas of the ramp, like at this green level, they've been able to work on that stuff during the day because there's more space to route cars around it. So they can definitely jump from spot A to spot B, and it gives them more to do, so they don't have to like stop and start and come back and all that stuff. So it definitely is more efficient, I think, for them. If they're on site, they're bringing in a dumpster, they're bringing all their equipment, they're doing traffic coding over here, they may as well do it over there. It's just easy to jump around rather than bringing them special for this small area of traffic coding.
So is there any way you can quantify that into dollars? Do you think it's a 10% value, or is there?
It's hard to say. You're talking about mobilization cost. I think we typically put on maybe up to $10,000 for mobilization. So you're talking maybe like $10,000, something like that. It's not going to be a huge cost, but that's just the mobilization cost. If you're talking about the application of a traffic coding, I think you're firing up a lot of equipment, you're getting a lot of materials, you're able to order in larger quantities, so some of that savings would be realized there as well. So.
Other questions? Report. Just doing some quick back of the napkin math. It looks like priority A1 and A2 total of about 100,000 estimate, and priority B on the green level is 135,000. So we're up to almost $250,000 before we've discussed costs for priority C and D, which are costs to be determined. Who would who would determine those costs? Would it be you, or would we actually put a bid spec together?
So that would be in discussions with Walker. Again, they did a condition assessment of the entire ramp, so they would have like quantities at each level. At this point, there's we don't know how we would want things broken out. We didn't want to throw like a monster number out there. But if we wanted to look beyond and look at some of these other levels, I think we could break that out and say, well, at the purple level, how much quantity did you have for concrete repairs, and how much traffic coding would it take? And I think they could look at their quantities, look at current costs, because the costs are always changing. So they could try to put together some numbers if there's a certain amount that we're trying to just get familiar with here. But I think we just didn't know a scope of what we were looking at doing there, so we just...
Is it safe to assume that most, if not all of these repairs are better done in warmer climate than waiting until February? Yeah,
the traffic coding especially needs to be done it's ideally done in the summer. I know they've actually done repairs and come back to do the traffic coding separately in the past. And it's definitely be easier to do things in the summer, spring, fall.
But have those projects, most of those already been bid out? It's the middle of June.
Yeah, middle of June. It might be tough. I know in the past we've done it and been at this point, and I think they actually completed the repairs on when I was looking back at this entrance ramp. I think they completed it in the winter, but they were doing a lot of work down inside that mechanical room too. So it can be done. Just a little trickier. I don't know if they need to apply heat and things like that, but that can add to the cost.
So if we were to today to approve, let's start with those recommended repairs to the parkade alone. How long for paperwork, advertising, bid specs?
Yeah, I think it's like around 30-ish days for advertising. And it depends on the scope of work, I guess, that we're talking about doing, but I would think typically, I think they'd need maybe 2 months, maybe to put together, a month and a half to 2 months, maybe for construction documents. So you'd probably be looking at maybe getting it bid out and spring construction might be the best bet for next year,
Oh,
potentially. But we'd have to visit with contractors and see. It depends on their workload.
so the urgency is there, but
Yeah.
we're good for another year.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, potentially. We're not, yeah, it's not like a huge structural failure. It's just like we're noticing, water seeping in.
Deterioration.
There's, cracking and spalling, there's little bits of chunks of concrete that could be coming off as vehicles drive, but, yeah, it's,
Okay, so I was trying to.
Chris, just refresh my memory. So the last time this was done was, you thought, in 2016?
2016, there was significant corrosion, at the ramp. Like there was rebar corroding, there was lots of spalling, there was chunks of concrete falling off, down below,
Into the
just
boiler.
falling off and that into that mechanical room. So it was a lot more significant than what we're seeing now. But it's like everything's been repaired, and then, now we're kind of seeing some more water infiltration and things like that. But
So the slab was not repaired, though, before?
the slab was repaired. Yep, they chipped out, hammered out a lot of concrete. Actually, we had the slab shored from below for quite a while, and formed it up. Did some fast setting concrete patching material, and then replaced a lot of rebar. Put in some what's called galvanic anodes, which helps just kind of control corrosion on the rebar for a certain length of time. But yeah, there was a lot of concrete repair that was done, a lot of patching work.
And so the lifespan, is this a normal lifespan then of having to make this repair?
Well, so the lifespan of like those galvanic anodes, they call it, which would kind of try to limit the corrosion, is about 10 to 15 years, if you have water infiltration, is what I'm told. So I would say we're kind of under that. I actually didn't see any corrosion. Like you'll see like brown rusting. The rebar will, as it rusts, expands, start popping concrete off, things like that. So I didn't actually physically see any brown rusting, but what I saw was like, well, the concrete is cracked, water's infiltrated in, and when water gets in and then winter comes, it expands. It makes those cracks a little bit bigger. So you're seeing some of that, some concrete popping off kind of thing. So I think they, right now, once they get into it, they might have, find a little more, but right now it's more of a concrete spalling thing. Need to get out the old stuff, patch it in. The rebar should hopefully still be in pretty good shape and be a pretty quick patch. I would hope so.
Derek, in your estimation, would it be possible to get priority A1 done by fall this year? Just
I would,
the ramp?
potentially, if that's just the A1, that part could potentially be done. We'd have to check with contractors' schedules and see, but I mean, it could be late fall, early winter work, but.
And historically, this type of repair has been done on a sole source basis, right? I mean,
Right, it's yeah, because typically, so when there's specialty contractors that do these repairs, like they're familiar with all these different fast setting materials and and removing concrete here and all that. There's just specialty contractors that deal with that, and in the past we've dealt with a contractor based out of Fargo.
Vector.
Yeah, Vector Construction.
Okay. Other questions? Before we proceed on to the next ramp then, I guess? 3rd Street ramp?
Yeah, you just want me to kind of explain it?
Sure.
Okay.
Yep, walk us through it.
Yeah, I mean, the 3rd Street ramp, I've walked that through many times over the years, and basically I would say a lot of things are unchanged. It's actually very good condition. There's, in the past, when they poured the slabs, there's construction joints that are visible, and typically they'll put on a traffic coating over the top of those joints just because when water infiltrates, it might want to go into there. The 3rd Street ramp does not have those, but I would say if there's ever any traffic coating being done or work being done on that ramp, I would recommend that those be traffic coated just to help protect those. But that ramp has very little right now that we've noticed over the years. Very little work needed. And the Galleria, so we walked through that. I know repairs had been done on that. I don't recall the years, but roughly the same time. I want to say 2015, maybe something like that. I know there was some tenant work done, some traffic coating was applied. The only thing we really noticed on that ramp is at the roof level, there's traffic coating that was put on some of the prior repairs, and it gets a little roughed up, I think, from snow removal equipment and things like that. So you start seeing little spots here and there that are kind of holes poked through, and I think that's kind of what happened at the parkade ramp. You know, little holes get poked through, and there water is running, so it gets into like the underneath this coating, starts to just, you know, bubble things up and starts permeating through the concrete and creating some issues. That's more of on a slope. At the Galleria, you're kind of on that top roof level. It's more flat, so I don't think it's as big of a concern, but, you know, if they're touching up, you know, in the area, like if there's any more traffic coating work being done, you know, you kind of want to try to touch that stuff up when you can somehow. So.
Okay. 6th Street ramp.
And then the 6th Street ramp is the newest ramp, and that one, there's, like I was saying, structurally there's no issues that I'm seeing. That one has the traffic coating over the construction joints that we see, and I've just non-structural issues other than that stairwell. I mean, I noticed that there's a lot of water coming in, and I think it's causing some cracking and stuff in the stairwells, but nothing that's a structural concern. It's just I kind of look at the bottoms of the doors, and I'm a structural guy, not an architectural guy, but I look at the bottom of the door sweep, and there's like a gap there, and I'm just wondering if there's a better way to seal that. So it might be good to consult an architect on that to see if there's a good way to keep water out, because I think the water gets...
Are there sweeps on the doors now? But
there are, but they're like a brush type of sweep.
Okay.
And I feel like...
Rubber, yeah.
No, not rubber, yeah. So I don't know what's allowed in, you know, entry vestibules like that, or what a good idea is. Just kind of noting my observations, just seems like water is able to get in like at every level. The wind drives it in, or it runs down somehow, because I think the parking ramp is kind of built up to the vestibule in some locations, so the water runs down the wall. Sometimes it gets in that way. So
Sounds like management can probably take care of that, I would think, would hope. Questions on these other structures? Any other questions? Suggestions, recommendations? Would it make sense for us to try and proceed with priority A1 this year? Get that rolling, get it off of our, I guess maybe we're probably going to spend more on mobilization than if we did everything, right? But on the other hand, we'd gain a winter of protection
right.
at the parkade. What do you recommend, Eric?
Yeah, I would recommend priority A1, the entrance ramp repair, or the entrance repair at the parkade ramp. And then as far as priority A2, I would recommend, if that work is being done and you're doing that traffic coating, I would recommend that the recent repairs, that $15,000 repair cost for traffic coating be done at a minimum on the green level at the same time.
Sure.
And then beyond that, the rest of that green level, I have it listed as priority B, that green level south half, is something that could be discussed in the future. But I think that priority A1 and A2 is what we'd recommend be done, and see if we can get that done this fall yet.
Thoughts, questions, recommendations, motions?
I think it's a good idea to pursue priority A1 and A2 if possible this year. Pushing it into next year, we're going to be dealing with inflation and added costs there as well. So I think if it's possible to get A1 and A2 done yet this fall, that should be the direction we take. Might be a question for, well, something Derek explores, if that's even feasible or possible to get done yet this fall. But
Is that a motion?
sure, let's make that a motion.
Is there a second to Jake's motion?
I will second that.
Okay, further discussion? I think everybody understands what we're trying to accomplish here, so. Okay, call the roll, please, Sue. If there's no further discussion.
Josh?
Yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes, that motion carries. As to the remaining items, priority B, C, and D on the parkade, which is our oldest and best, most loved ramp, what would be the next steps? Would be to authorize preparation of documents?
Right. Yeah, we'd look to get construction documents put together, and we would work with Walker Consulting to do that.
And you'd come back to us with cost
Right.
estimates for C and D, all three of them, actually, probably.
Yeah, we could provide, if you would like to have costs broken out, I guess we could have some discussion about how we'd want to break out these costs. I know in the past, I think we have provided like a total cost to do everything. It wasn't really broken out, and it was, I think, a bit overwhelming. But we could definitely take a look at, breaking down these costs a little bit. But I know based on their numbers, they kind of assume a certain percent increase. So like the cost, the repairs area sometimes increase year to year. So they'd have to look at their numbers from back in 2021 or whenever they did their walkthrough and do that. So.
Jeremy, any input or questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, authority board members. I guess kind of from, our past experience on the repairs that we've done, being as, from an engineer standpoint, since they're involved and we want them being done correctly, we would need to have engineer drawings done, so we would have to go out for bid to attain that, I guess, and then use those engineer drawings then to go out for RFP, just given the scope of the amount of work being done. I think that would be prudent and required to do RFP for that. And I think that the time frame, as Derek explained, that it's not structurally critical to necessarily get it done this fall, even though that would, could have advantages, but to go through the process of RFP, that would take a few, if not several months to get those engineer drawings go out for RFP. But then we would still be in that time frame of being able to then get contractors going and mobilize come spring of 2025. So that might be, I guess, a more reasonable time frame.
What I'm hearing, or correct me if I'm hearing, so you're saying hold off on trying to get the priority A1 and 2 done this fall?
Well, I guess it depends on how quick we can get engineer schematics back.
So do we have to do a request for proposal or whatever for the drawings?
The engineer drawings, I think the scope of that work would be under the, I guess, dollar threshold, so we can just go out for a regular bid, present that to you, the board, for approval on that. But I think the scope of repair work would constitute an RFP.
Correct, I understand
Yep.
that, but the design, those documents we don't.
Yeah,
need.
we can just collect regular bids for your approval on that.
Okay,
Which that, I don't think that part would, I mean, we'd probably have something by next meeting, I think.
okay, well, we have a motion and it's been approved, so let's proceed. The rest of the items, do you wish to hash through those any further today? The other ramps, maybe the next meeting? They're expensive beasts to operate.
Just maybe one question, when you say priority B, are we talking a year, 2 years?
It's more of like, we just gotta call it priority B. Excuse me. Priority B, more just to give it like a sense of urgency kind of thing.
Okay.
Not to say that it's like urgent. We notice things like when you walk on the green level, there's a lot of columns that, I think there's a lot of water that sit by them, and you see like rust and corrosion of rebar sticking out on the side, just at the base of the column. So there's just a lot of things like that are noticed. And then, like I said, in the past, we know that the tendons on that slab at the green level, which is what priority B is talking about, have broken, and we've had to put in those beams. So we just wouldn't want to have any more issues with tendons on that area. So it's more of a preventative thing. It's hard to say because you don't know until you kind of actually physically investigate, potential tendons, or if you see something or notice something that there's a crack. But it's been going this way for many, many years. But just something to provide whatever protection you can. So I think if I would say once if priority A1 and A2 are done, if the funds are available to put some more maintenance into it, then you would consider it. Is how I would put it. So.
Go ahead, Kyle.
So Derek, it seems like obviously in these ramps, there's always the traffic coding, right? That always becomes, and to your point earlier, there's some history of what we've been maintaining in these ramps, as well as understanding that obviously the traffic flow in there doesn't change dramatically. It's pretty predictable, right? I mean, we kind of have a general idea. So is there any way that you can look at it where it's like scheduling for the most part on an annual basis, there should be an allocation into traffic coding? And it might be on this level, it might be here, but
Yeah.
is there a way to stabilize that? So if you look at it and go all of a sudden, you know, we're not necessarily waiting 2 or 3 years and then applying a coat, but maybe we're doing it ongoing.
Yeah.
And just continue to working through those areas. And what happens over a greater period of time is it naturally becomes, you know, it's like that area hasn't been done now for 7 years, but that's next on the list.
Yep.
We're not gonna get away from the traffic coating, right?
Yep. I've talked to like these repair contractors, and I know they've had, they've said they've done maintenance, like they've had maintenance contracts to kind of walk through the ramp, like we will repair so many square feet of traffic coating. They will walk through the ramps. If there's areas that they just notice that, hey, this needs repair, they will touch them up and do that. And the same thing for concrete repairs. If, hey, there's a spall over here, they'll repair that and just kind of walk through. They have a certain amount of square footage or areas that they can repair on like on an annual basis that they just kind of walk through. So that's something that would be help make things more proactive, I feel like, because you just don't want to be reactive. You don't want the traffic coating to wear away and the concrete to get deteriorated. Now you're dealing with big concrete repairs and the traffic coating. If we can get on top of it somehow and maintain the traffic coating, it's like putting an umbrella on top of things, right? And then the water can't get in and cause more damage. You know, you're putting that money to the traffic coating rather than having to deal with, you know, more reactive the more significant repairs underneath. So something to consider, but I'm not sure how you go about that. I think sometimes that's like a private ramp situation where they are easier able to set up a contract. I mean, I have to visit with these contractors and see, you know, how can this be done? You know, if because sometimes they provide like a certain square footage that they'll repair. You know, I don't know if they just use that every year or if they give money back if they don't. But something that we could consider. Just it's a matter of the logistics of how it's worked out contract-wise. I'm not sure.
Just the small area, the 40 by 60 foot area was 15,000. That's 2,400 square feet. That's 6 1/4 a square foot. So, you know, and I'm sure that, you know, that's going to vary if you do a bigger area or a smaller area. But do you recall what we talked about a couple of years ago to do the entire parkade? Was it $700,000, $800,000?
It was up there, yeah. Something I want to say between that and
Seems
a
to me
million or
that's-
something like that was
Caused a
significant
little-
cost.
Roughly about 100,000 per level.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so it was approaching like
So I mean,
750,000.
obviously, from a bid and cost perspective, it makes more sense to do the whole thing, right? Rather than one level at a time and mobilize, but it's a big number. So, okay. Other questions? Thanks, Derek.
Yep. Thank you.
We'll see you back here in July. Other business, do we have a report from the newly elected park board?
I could still get arrested or something, Jim. Authority members, just a couple quick updates, Kate, from the downtowners. Street Fair is September 13th and 14th, just FYI, and that's always a big ramp day for everybody, so if you just want to mark your calendars. And then, Jeremy, we do have permission to use the Sanford Valet lot, so we'll probably work with you again to valet into the parkade that Friday of Street Fair. And then they don't do it on Saturday, obviously. One thing I just wanted to, two things I wanted to mention. One was in the survey that Maria did for you all, and she's on her honeymoon, so she says hello. I'm sure she misses being here. There was discussion about people parking not in the spaces, and that was making the ramp seem maybe fuller than it was. And so we reached out to a couple of folks, and in a couple of communities, they also paint the stripe on the knee wall so that you can see it, you know, when you're pulling up to the space. So just something to consider. I used to open my door and look down, make sure I was there, but my new car won't let me do that. It puts the parking brake on so I don't fall out and die. So something to consider, and maybe not on all the levels or all the ramps, but wherever maybe it's the most prevalent of an issue. The second thing I wanted to mention was both the Downtowners and the Downtown Bismarck Community Foundation, which is our development arm, recently purchased a license for a geographic data software called Placer.ai. And essentially it follows you around with your phone, and you opt in by accepting the terms and uses of all the apps that you use and stuff like that. What we're doing right now, we're onboarding to that software. We can drop what's called points of interest anywhere downtown, and we can look at how many people are there, where they go after, where they are coming from before they go there, what zip codes they're coming from, who, you know, how much money they make. a ton of data. Yeah, Kyle, we see we know where you're going before and after the elbow room. So, what I have I have geofenced the ramps in that scenario. And so we'll be able to see when people are using the ramps, how long they use the ramps, what zip codes they're coming from, what parts of Bismarck they're coming from, who they are. So it'll be really interesting reporting and analytics for everybody. It'll also be really helpful in citing other ramps if we have a new ramp. So I'd be happy in July to just kind of show you how it works once we get
That'd
it a
be
little
great.
bit more.
But that
Figured
data
out.
that you're referring to, that assumes that the driver of that car has opted into has accepted the terms of
Yes,
use of the
so,
program.
and very large companies use the software like a Target and a
Sure.
Walmart and stuff. And so there's a bunch of different apps that they have access to. And then from them, they use an algorithm to extrapolate out a total. They can also look at residents versus workers to some extent, basically by how long your phone might be sleeping in one location for 8 hours. A couple things we can't see are sensitive locations, so federal buildings, sensitive medical things, and then we do need about what they would call them panels, but that's essentially your phone, about 50 to look at a residential unit. So we were talking about trestle a little bit. We want to see that commercial underneath and the residential above and how we split that out. And they just do that to protect your privacy. If it's under 50, you can kind of figure out maybe who's who. And so they won't break it down super tight like that. But we went through it at our board meeting yesterday, and it's so super cool, the amount of information that you can get, the loyalty of a business, so how many times people have gone there, multiple times when they stay there. And also help hours of operation and days of operation when you've got peak times or it's super cool. And I'd love to show you guys next month if you're interested.
Sounds good. Anything else? Any questions of Kate?
Thanks.
Big brother Kate, big sister Kate. Any further business? Anyone have anything for the good of the order? If not, and if there's no objection, we stand adjourned until July 11th. Thanks, everybody.